Everyone. Welcome. This, as Donna said, it's a little bit different. We're trying something a little different today when we were talking about how to kind of end our year of events and do something somewhat familiar, but format-wise and content-wise, mix it up a little bit. We had this thought of let's just make it casual and fun and relaxing, because I, for one, am a little bit done with being presented to and spoken at with PowerPoint. So this is not that, and hopefully that came across in the invitation and in your expectations. We are not going to share any PowerPoint with you, no matter how much you ask. I won't. I don't have any ready. And we don't even have anything scripted. In fact, what we decided to do was something that happens naturally anyway. Myself and many others, and many of you likely, have conversations now and then that sometimes you think afterwards, well, that was kind of a good conversation. We talked about some interesting topics, had some ideas, solved the world's problems, or just had some fun and shared perspectives. And that really is one of my main goals, is when we talk to others, is understanding that our perspective can sometimes be very limited, and to bring in other additional perspectives, people who see the same thing slightly differently, can really expand our view and give us more understanding and compassion without getting political or anything. That's kind of one of the sides that still, we are a cybersecurity company, and that's our focus. So this is going to be related to, hopefully, cybersecurity concerns and issues that plague us, or at least interest all of us, but in a very different format, I think. I've kind of, in thinking about it since we've kind of built the concept and it came to reality, considered it more of almost like a reality show, and not that far off, because reality shows, while they're natural and supposed to be unscripted and just let things happen, they're still a little bit contrived when they pick their participants. They choose people that they think will be interesting and likely either fight and not get along, or get along really well and hook up. That's kind of how they want those things to work. And that's part of what we did here. While we haven't scripted anything, we haven't prepped, we haven't planted questions, we have chosen our guests to hopefully make this interesting from various perspectives. And I'm going to start by actually introducing one of those guests, Mr. Henri Baez, who is filling the role you might have seen in one of the subtitle lines for this event, that cybersecurity legend / vendor, a CISO, and a consultant walk into a bar, ... And that's kind of part of the idea, is we just want to see what happens when we talk and try and make it interesting and pertinent. But to represent that CISO role for us, which is probably the one that is most sympathetic to most of you and common to most of our attendees here, the one on the front lines actually trying to solve security problems for their organization, their people, is Henri Baez, working for the city of Norfolk, Virginia. I will let him introduce himself, maybe tell you a little bit more about his actual role and background. And go ahead, Henri.
Hello, everybody. How you guys doing today?
Everybody can wave. We have some cameras on, so we can see some of you, or you can do the hands in chat too.
Not sure if you can hear.
Hey, hi.
This is Henri Baez. I work at the city of Norfolk as an information security officer. We wear a few additional roles into that process, but the city has, multiple people from different areas. It's a very diverse environment. I have been in the city for since 2007. I have been working on the city, and started as a network engineer, and have worked as a network security, and now I'm the lead of the cybersecurity team for several years now. There are, challenges. There are a lot of different things going on, which many of you probably experience in a day-to-day basis with the recent, threat landscape. I do everything from managing everything cyber related, firewalls, intrusion prevention, antivirus, all that, and as well as other things related to cloud initiatives such as Microsoft Office 365, and everything in between. We have a small team of personnel. They're dedicated, very hardworking individuals, and we tackle everything that comes our way. So It's very diverse, and I'm very, proud to work for the city. I live in the city of Norfolk, so there's some bias on it. So that's where I am right now.
There's some
Looking forward for
bias. I
I
like
am
it.
biased.
Bias. Excellent.
Looking forward for the conversation.
Cool. Well, thanks. And we're so glad you could be here. And Henry's been a client of ours and a customer at Checkpoints for many years. So there's a relationship, but it's not like we're, again, doesn't mean we've planted anything. This is for an open and honest conversation. But that's from that consumer end. And somebody's not muted, but I might do that for everyone. Hold on a second. Bear with me because I might mute somebody I didn't want to, but let's keep people from unmuting accidentally because that does happen. And let's make sure that let's see. All right. Anyway, that's from the consumer end of things with the perspective of those trying to actually defend against cyber threats and attacks. The other end of that is a different type of company and a different individual who works for the manufacturing side, the vendor side, actually tasked with creating solutions to those cyber problems and threats. And to represent that angle of things, I'm very happy to have a friend and longtime, not colleague, but somebody else in the industry that works for Checkpoint. But I'll let him go a little bit deeper. And it's Dameon Welch-Abernathy, in many cases better known as PhoneBoy, here to be that vendor representative. But again, just all of us in cybersecurity, but also as he will, I think, sometimes humbly call himself a B-list tech celebrity. So
I actually refer to myself as a C-list, but
correct me or say anything additional that I missed.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of history there. So I'm about as honestly, I've been involved with Checkpoint in some way, shape, or form since 1996. So Checkpoint itself was founded at the end of '93. So that gives you a pretty good idea of where I kind of started in this process. I started working for a reseller. I ended up working for Nokia for 10 years, and then they acquired, Checkpoint acquired that business from Nokia, and so I've been with Checkpoint a very long time, and so about and I've worked in the for me it's been I kind of came up through the technical ranks. I was a technical support engineer, had to learn. When I started all this stuff, I was learning from ground zero because I knew about computers and stuff, but I didn't know anything about networking. I didn't know anything about security, and guess what? This industry just sort of grew up around me, and all of a sudden it took me a long time to actually accept the fact that I was in the cybersecurity industry because I'm working for a vendor. People are actually doing real cybersecurity out there. Why did but the reality is, yeah, we're doing cybersecurity. In fact, we're doing a whole lot of stuff, right? And it's funny because I've watched it grow up, and I go back through some of the stuff that we came up with as a company back in the 90s, and it was a little bit too soon for some of it, but so there's an image. I wish I had it. This is one of those times where I kind of wish I had the PowerPoint. I'd show you this image from the 90s of all of these different things and technologies that we saw and even had solutions for back in the day. But it was well before that we could actually, that everything was it was almost too early. And now I go look back at that actual that diagram, and I go, yeah, we're doing all that now, right? It all comes back full circle. So the vision that I think that Checkpoint as a company has is it's far reaching, right? And I think it goes back a long time, and we're now starting to deliver on that. And I feel very fortunate that I get to be basically a spokesperson and kind of the front man, right? In a sense, right? I'm not the only front man, of course, but there are others. But and what I do is, ironically, what I did at the very beginning of my career, which is basically be in the cyber, helping people in the Checkpoint community now, except I run, the official cybersecurity community called Checkmates, which is what we've been in. And so that's what I've been, I'm the front man for it. Again, we got a team of people that are helping out with things, but so I'm still, I'm doing everything, I'm doing event. This morning I did an event, right? And so I'm doing, so I'm helping, going through our technology, helping people with things, and I'm doing it on the community. And we're starting to get into some other stuff in the company now. And it's, as far as, other initiatives that are again about helping our customers. And so it's a real interesting mix of things. And yeah, so, but I'm kind of doing what I started out doing, but we're also, obviously now expanding and, doing other things. They call my job marketing. Yeah. I don't feel like a marketing guy. I'm just a tech guy trying to help people out. Right. They call it marketing. All right, fine, whatever. So I have the perspective of seeing this industry just basically grow up. Now, granted, I was at one, I was dealing with one set of products, but the challenges are the same, right? And so, you have, so because there's lots of customers on this call, you all have challenges, right? And we certainly want to hear about them as a vendor and see what we can do to solve them. And there may be some things we can't solve, and that's fine, but we do what we can. And that's where, so it's really important. It's a two-way conversation, right? That it's not just we're telling you what you need to do. You got to tell us too, right? And so, talk with your vendors, talk with the, Atlantic Data Security, get them, tell them what you need, and we'll figure it out. I mean, and I think that's one of the things I like about Check Point as a company is we really do figure it out, and we do it right. We're not going to just put a solution out because we think it's because it's the latest and greatest thing. It's going to be something that actually solves a problem and keeps you more secure. And that's, and it's ultimately about, we are prevent first. And I think, and I feel very strongly about that you have to take that approach in cybersecurity. If you're not, that's not to say you shouldn't detect and respond. I'm just saying, if you can prevent it, that's going to be better. And you're going to be in a better shape. So, anyway, I've went on far too long, I think. So you get the idea.
It's perfect. That's exactly what we're trying to talk about, is that perspective from different sides, and haven't been here a while. And I'm going to put a pin in something you said and come back to that. But for those who don't know me, I represent kind of the middleman, and hopefully the way our screens are being positioned on your screen right now, they're on either side of me. They are on mine, but I put them there. But we are, the derogatory way of looking at it is we're the middleman. The VAR has in some cases gotten this bad name as just the means to an end to connect the consumer to the manufacturer. And yet I don't like to think of us that way. And we usually aren't, because we try to focus on that VA, the value add in VAR, because selfishly from an engineering perspective, that's more interesting. That's more challenging as an engineer. To resell a product is easy. That doesn't take a lot of expertise, but to do it properly, to make sure we're getting the right product in the right place and implementing the right tools and doing it right and helping make sure that you're seeing success and getting value out of it, that's where we really focus. And that, to Damon's point, the evolution of a company that's been around as long as we haven't, as long as Check Point has to be a constant thing. I think we have to be evolving and addressing new challenges, because once you solve one problem, especially in cybersecurity, the bad guys find another way around, and they find new attack vectors. And it's not a set it and forget it thing like, hey, I'm secure, let's move on and do some totally different thing. It's a constantly moving target, which for me in this industry has always been kind of a selfishly, again, a good thing, because it keeps us employed. If it was, yes, implement my security program and now we don't need you anymore, we'd go on to find the next opportunity and probably be in some other business, maybe be sommeliers or something we'll talk about later. But I've been able to see, fortunately, I've been working with Check Point for about 25 years and been able to watch that evolution. I think sometimes that evolution and advancement in these companies gets lost. And Damon, I'd ask if you've kind of seen that or felt that maybe Check Point is far too often always seen as the firewall company, because you invent it, you make a name on it, and then that's forever who you are.
No, for sure. I mean, it's honestly, it's something that we run into a lot as a vendor. And it's when we produce new solutions that are different, people don't, I'd say there's two dynamics to it. Number one, right, that's where we made our name. But second of all, one of the criticisms that we have is that we've received as a company sometimes is that perhaps our marketing could be improved a bit, right? And that we're not as out there as some other vendors are. And so some of it just comes down to lack of awareness of the fact that we have solutions in the space. And I mean, we've done some, we've done some really exciting stuff, and it's not all known. And I think the biggest splash we've done recently was acquiring Avanan, which I think is a fantastic solution set that, by the way, filled a hole in our portfolio that we didn't really have. I mean, we were working on a solution for that, and we were actually using Avanan on the back end for it. But their solution is so much more, is overall so much more developed and does some things that we weren't doing. And by the way, from a cultural perspective, it's a great fit. I mean, I've known some of those guys since the beginning almost, and they're so I think it was a great acquisition for us, and it's that's an example of something that is again, you wouldn't think a checkpoint for that. But it is something that we're doing, and it's a new thing, and I think it's it's something I run into a lot, is that, oh, you don't realize that we do much more than that. Well, we do, and that's just...
it's one downside to becoming too good and too successful and too well known for one thing, that it's hard to get people to look deeper. It's almost like a typecasting or stereotyping type challenge that we see you as this. And that brings me back to typecasting, brings me back to my other thing I wanted to mention, that the other way I looked at this event was kind of as a talk show, like a late night talk show, like Kimmel or Fallon or something. But to date myself a little bit, I'm more of a Letterman. And it's almost like that, but we don't have a monologue. I'm not going to do a top 10 list. We don't have a band. I don't have Paul over there to strike up a song, but I will steal one bit. And I have an answer to this, but I'm going to ask both of you guys first, just to spark a different line of conversation. Off the wall, and you guys aren't prepared for this, but brushes with greatness. Anybody ever watch Letterman and see they'd have people that had very predefined stories, and they'd kind of embellish and make them a little silly? Does either of you, in any order, have any story to relate on, ideally around cybersecurity or not? What's the most famous person you've met, brushes with greatness or something? Somebody in chat I just happened to notice. And we're not going to embellish it and tell you the after the story, but anyone have one? I'll share one to start if you don't.
I don't.
So I've actually got a story from very, very early in my career, that I don't know how true it is, but so this, I hadn't even started working for the Checkpoint reseller yet. In fact, I think this is actually a great story. So in how I realized I probably had some showmanship skills. So the company I worked for at the time, I was their in-house sysadmin. This was 95, 96 kind of time frame. And we went to a conference, and we actually, I think we were starting to sell TIS Gauntlet. This was actually the first firewall I ever used was TIS Gauntlet. But what we did was we captured a break-in in progress, and this is on like a Solaris or SunOS box or something that was with the network capture, right? But what we were doing was we were playing the network capture. We had it on some system, probably a Spark box or whatever. We had that network capture just basically playing, and you could watch this thing going on. And so I started, and the thing it was just in our booth, and I just started narrating it. It was just a total like fluke or whatever, and by the way, and people were like interested in it, so it's like, okay, I guess I'm being kind of showman, and I wasn't even really trying to. That was just kind of what I felt like doing, and it seemed like it was a cool thing. And now, somewhere along the line, somebody comes up and he's wearing a badge, and I don't know if it was actually Kevin Mitnick, and I also did not know who Kevin Mitnick was back in the day, right? But so if I'm thinking about it, I don't remember the conversation much. I just remember that I may have met Kevin Mitnick, and I'm not sure, and this is, and I'm just, at this point, keep in mind that in 1995, 96, I just graduated college with a comp sci degree, and I didn't know I knew squat about cybersecurity other than just kind of protecting, Unix systems and that kind of thing. I didn't know.
And he was one of those guys that became better known after he was done doing what he was famous for too.
Yeah. And it may have just been some random dude that was using that name too, for all I know. I mean, because I can neither confirm nor deny that I met him, but that name sticks out of my head. It's like, hey, maybe I did meet this guy. But it's a fun story because it is something that, it's something that is unique that happened to me. And that's also kind of, I guess now I'm kind of doing, 25 years later, I'm kind of doing the same stuff, except I'm doing it on Zoom and, not doing it in person anymore. Cause that's a bit of a challenge right now under the current circumstances,
is not nearly as good of a story, but it's a significant one. It was at least 20 years ago. It was before Netanium and ADS, so it was 20 plus. I was at a SANS conference and met Dr. Diffie of Diffie and Hellman fame, which was just one of those. I barely knew who he was. I knew it was significant, but he had the long gray hair, looked like the professor type, and just enough to say hi and shake a hand, kind of a thing. So that was it. and this is where Letterman would come up with a great after story of where that went afterwards. You know, we went out for drinks and no. Anyway, what other thoughts? You guys have questions for me or for each other? That wouldn't hurt either. It's not about me. We're just sitting here chatting. What's our next topic that isn't going to be polarizing?
Let's see, because there's plenty of polarizing topics elsewhere. If you want to go,
that's easy. That's the low hanging fruit, to come up with something. If anyone else also, again, we'll go to the chat, and if anyone does have a question they'd love us to ask or curiosity, I don't mind, and I don't want to keep an eye on the chat the whole time. I want to be discussing, but if somebody does have something they'd like to say or ask us, by all means do so in the chat.
So I have a question for Henry, just to kind of break things up a little bit.
Go ahead.
So what's the biggest cybersecurity challenge that you have as an organization, really, since you work for a city? And so what's the biggest challenge that you have to face?
That's a good question. I think I'm not sure how many people might be in the call today that are in the local government, but I can tell you the way that we are structured with so many different types of I will look like the departments, for instance, police and fire, and we have civic facilities that do all the shows and entertainment and all that. So each department is like its own industry, and keeping track with we use Checkpoint obviously as our perimeter protection, and trying to keep something like kind of like policy set for everybody that goes through that environment, and keep it in check without sacrificing others is very challenging all the time. There's you're trying to make something work for somebody, it might not work for somebody else. It's a lot of things that we face in a day-to-day basis. Their needs change very often. And again, there's several things we serve the public. It's not like a financial institution and everything's around the financial business. So many different types of variables that we have to face. And now, I guess with COVID and people working remotely, that presents yet another challenge. The typical settings that we have, where it's mainly about on-prem. That's kind of like how we have tailored protection in the past, and now we have to think about more like cloud-driven environment. So I think right now one of the biggest challenges that I from protecting the city of Norfolk, it will be around the protection with the working from home, given that you don't have the luxury to have everybody with a very strong protection system behind the home. For instance, you can only know what you have at your environment, but a person working from their own personal computer out of their Wi-Fi, whatever they are located, it might not even be at the house. That's where the challenges for us right now is. I think that's one of my biggest concerns is the working from home and the remote users. That's probably where I put the top issue. And also, ransomware related.
Well, and I think, like I said earlier, you're likely in the same boat as many of the people on the session, in that they're all of us, even us, we're dealing with the same things when we shifted, right, where, we're expected, of course, to know a little bit more about how to secure our own people, and we've got stuff in place, but we still have to change the way we do things once you shift the majority of your connectivity to somewhere else that you don't have necessarily the same visibility of, and Checkpoint as well, and at the vendor side.
Oh yeah, we went through this. I mean, yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory for us, right? Because we went as a vendor. So March of 2020, right? It was very clear the direction things were heading, and so now keep in mind in the Americas, we are very much in a we're very much in this mode of already working from home for the most part. Anyway, we have a couple of offices and a couple of bigger offices in the U.S., but for the most part, the vast, like the field sales force and a bunch of other departments were already working from home, but not all of them. And so all of a sudden we had to, and everybody, in key places, all of a sudden now had to work from home. And and so our remote access infrastructure had to change pretty drastically overnight. And we had to enable new ways of working for departments, which it wasn't possible to necessarily work from home before. So we went from not being able to do that to doing that in like 2 weeks. And we had to grow our infrastructure. We had to change some policies and add some things in.
But you already had licensing.
But licensing was not a problem. Although we had some initiatives around giving people licensing and that kind of thing. We've been pretty open with the eval licenses anyway. That's not a problem. But
that helped tremendously.
Oh yeah. But
it was one of those Checkpoint stepped up to help do the right thing when everyone had this unanticipated demand, and that was nice to see.
Right.
Exactly. But we had to change too. And I could see it on the community very quickly. We actually did in the first, I'd say like in April, right, of 2020, we did a lot of stuff around. I mean, we got a lot of questions around remote access. And by the way, this is stuff that Checkpoint's had for 20 years. It's some of it's not new, although the licensing, that was some stuff that we had to explain a bit better and understand and help and show people, okay, here's how you can check how many people are logged in, and here's the usage and all that stuff. So we took this on, right, as a but that's just remote access. Now you get into the security. Well, we already have Harmony Endpoint, and we can talk about all the great stuff that Harmony Endpoint can do. But that's really, but it's Ben, there's a difference between securing a corporate asset, which you can control what's on it and have the right tools and stuff on it, versus securing the random endpoint that somebody's using from their house. There's differences between those two things. And so that's where it does get challenging. And so then, and also when your stuff isn't your stuff isn't on-prem, right? You're accessing stuff in the cloud. You're using Office 365. You're using all these other things, right? Securing all of that is a challenge, no question. And you have to think about the security problem differently. And that's, and again, I think this is where I think we've done a pretty good job of figuring out, okay, here's where we can add value, and here's where we can tie in. And you still need something to provide that, to do the access control and to ensure that that you're not getting malicious data and that kind of thing, right? You have to do all that, but how you do it is different when you're accessing something on-prem through a security gateway versus accessing something somewhere else, right? And that's in the cloud or whatever. And how do you secure your cloud applications, all that stuff. So there's so much in that question, right? It's like, how do you do it? Well, but you have to you have to lower your exposure, right? Because what a lot of people did is they turned on RDP to the internet. Oh yeah, that's a real great idea. Yeah, our incident response team had a field day with that. The number of calls we got on stuff, but so just because what I think what happened with a lot of people is they said, well, we don't know what to do, so we're just going to open it up. And that wasn't such a great idea, right? So, and then, once you getting
it done, and it's getting it done securely are different mandates.
Yes, exactly. So and I think, and people are still struggling with this because, by the way, these challenges that we're all talking about right now have always been challenges, just not at the scale that they've been a challenge at, right? We've just never, anti-remote senior management mindset. Yeah.
That's my world.
Yeah.
That's why it's easier for me than you.
Daddy.
Exactly. It's all good.
Well, from Damon's perspective, in the vendor side of things, it's not a one size fits all there either. That there are different customers with different use cases. Henry's case having to deal with different aspects of a municipality. You've got the city hall, but then you've got emergency services, you've got waste disposal, you might have schools bundled in there as well. There's so many different competing aspects with very different needs. We see it in the corporate world as well, where different departments obviously have very different needs. But I think it's almost exacerbated in municipalities and government, because in some larger cities, for example, they'd be totally different departments run autonomously. But when you have them kind of all under that umbrella, trying to reduce costs and get some multiple use out of Henry and his team, they're dealing with such different people. It's challenging, and it can be hard to then know what way to handle them, I imagine. So let me ask you this, Henry, too. And this is kind of going to feed into another question I'd like to ask, but I also want to be sensitive to time. And let me just say this here. We could go on for hours, and Damon and I think our last call might've been 6 hours or something. We talked about all kinds of things, but I would love to keep doing it, but I want to try and be sensitive and keep our answers somewhat short at this point, because I'd love to ask questions of the rest of our attendees as well. But as an example, Henry, were you aware, and I likely know you are, but I'll ask of everyone else as well if you want to indicate in the chat, how many are aware of the recent acquisition of Avanan by Check Point, and what that actually means?
I actually received the notifications, and we have before gotten involved because we saw the information. It came to us because we trialed it out.
Well, and you're a customer, so you
right.
have a communication.
We
dialogue
received the
already.
notifications, correct?
Yeah.
And so we did actually the Avanan before, and like, this is a great solution, you know. But then Checkpoint had, and I'm not sure, Dameon, if there's any other mixes, because Checkpoint has so many different products within the Harmony and the Sandblast and all that. That I didn't know if it was they turn on another tool in the back end, or they acquire, you know, Avanan and mix it with another one, and now we have Harmony and the Quantum. I didn't know if it was something like, but I did get the notification. I got the email associated with that, and why it was important for us. And it's a great tool. It's a great acquisition for us as a customer to be able to get exposed to that, because it does cover a hole that everybody, I guess, right now is more important.
And we can get into, or let Damon get into the specifics of the product, but my point was more that this is something that's happened many times over the years. Checkpoint has made many acquisitions, developed internally many new solutions, and sometimes that gets lost with this overriding first impression everyone has is Checkpoint invented stateful inspection. They're the firewall guys. So when they delve into other areas because they see the demand, it isn't always well communicated or understood. And that's, I think, on the consumer's fault. I'm not trying to point fingers. You're over here for me, but sometimes we just don't pay attention. And
right.
Other times, as Damon mentioned, marketing becomes very important, getting the word out there. But we get bombarded with marketing all the time, and filtering that for what's really interesting and helpful. And when there's this other new company that just started up and that's all they do, wouldn't they be the best ones to use? Sometimes that I think there's a perception to think, oh yeah, that's what I should do because they're focused on it. But other times they're immature, they're new. Vendors like Checkpoint might have actually been doing this for 5 or 6 years, but not
right.
announced it well or published that data very well. And they might even be more mature, never mind that they're already in the ecosystem and can integrate and tie some of those features together. So we've seen, especially because we're in the middle and we're asked by our clients, what should we be looking at here? Even sometimes we don't always go to the vendors they already have. Our job usually, and what we usually like to understand, is what our clients have in place already, what they're having success with, what maybe they're not having success with. So we can help find not just a solution, not just the solution that we want to sell, but the right thing for them. And it's not always the same. It's not a one size fits all. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. And I'll be the first to say it, with Checkpoint even being a sponsor of this event and David being here, it's not always, the vendor's perspective is always, yeah, we're the best. We're always the best. And often they may be, but that's where I think we often come in as a value added reseller, not just to give you a price on a product, but help make sure you're going to get one that will work well for you and you'll get value out of. In fact, similarly for us, we've changed since we were originally just a VAR, and we do a lot more than that now as well. In fact, I'd ask if anyone in the chat as well know that we're actually providing degrees of managed services, and assessment services, completely not even talking about products, but doing very high level, CISO level assessment work to help make sure that our clients' programs are architected properly, and helping to try and identify gaps, not product specific, but are you even thinking about this and this and this? Do you have a person in this position based on your industry and your compliance requirements, are you doing the right thing? So we've developed whole practices around that as well. And I think we're still, by many of our, especially our long-term clients, seen as, oh, they're the guys I go to when I need a product, or similarly, when I need a firewall, I'll go to ADS. And yet we've been very successful in growing to do more than that. And I think that's almost an upside of doing it that way. Is we grow it well, we grow it in a controlled way, and we do it from a position of strength and skill, as opposed to let's go get a bunch of funding and build out a SOC and hope somebody wants it and we can make money at it and do a good job. We do it and grow it the other way. And I think Checkpoint's fairly similar in that sense, where they won't do it if they can't do it fairly well. Have you seen that in your experience with Checkpoint, Henry?
I think you
could be honest too. If you haven't, tell me.
You're correct. I think we started using Checkpoint when it was, maybe I'm incorrect, but it was N65 or G65
or R65.
R60 was NGX.
That was the first firewall that we had at the city a long time ago, and that changed, and it was replaced with Cisco ESAs, and that was it for Checkpoint for a long time, and it was just brought back again back in 2016. But one of the things for which at that time it was just firewall, right? And so when we brought in Checkpoint, many products out there, next generation firewall, and there's UTMs and all different things out there, but we replaced separate systems that we have to deal with when we are dealing with events. We have to go out to the intrusion prevention system out there. We got to go to the firewall. We got to go to the web filter for one event, and you spend all this time going around just to identify and correlate problems. So one of the things that Checkpoint addressed for us was, one, to get a single pane of glass for everything at the perimeter. Not only it helped to identify everything in one location, but also, since we had devices in line, it also cut down how many hops you had to go through and cut out a few additional single point of failures that could be in the line. So it addressed multiple issues for us, and then provide additional features that we didn't have, even if we had the other solutions combined. So that's what makes it for us. We didn't have all these additional things, and now we have it. And what I've seen is from every type of new solution that Checkpoint comes out there, it looks like it's always ahead of the curve. Yeah, I see things that 3 years, later, I see another company out there, marketing like we already demoed this or trial it out, and maybe we didn't get the funding for, but we didn't get it. But we had already even seen that, from Checkpoint. It might have changed the name, or later on it's introduced within the back end, but that's something that we have been able to leverage from the platforms that we have in our environment right now. And so we use firewalls at the perimeter. We also have the smart endpoint deploy. So there's all the things that we are now able to leverage, including probably the Avanan acquisition out there for the cloud. We done the CloudGuard SaaS. That was something on its own unique environment. We did get some exposure to that. But one of the things, what I was mentioning earlier, Eric, is that given we are a small local government and not necessarily the federal, and definitely we're not HP, so we don't have that big deep pocket. So we have to only being able to obtain what we are able to afford, budget wise and things like that. So not necessarily what we want and what we need, but what we are able to afford. And just when the COVID started and everybody was out there, we were able to go from announcement and everybody going home and only having 72 people on VPN to have 750 people in 2 weeks just deploy working from home. That would not be able to happen if we had another provider probably working at that time. So everything has worked very well for us, and I'm very appreciative of Checkpoint being able to do that for us. and
brings up,
anti-data security, they really put themselves out there to help us out with the.
well, again, that's where we come in to help try and connect dots when we see someone that especially if you have a number of Checkpoint products already and you're trying to solve a different challenge. We work with vendors that may solve just that challenge, but if Checkpoint can solve that as well, especially as we understand your needs, part of our job is to help you determine whether that's going to work. Because if it is, like in your case, it's going to be the path of least resistance. If it isn't, that's fine. We can have other discussions and talk about what might be more ideal for various reasons. Because again, sorry, Dameon, but one product is not always the one size fits all. It's always the best. And everybody, I think, in their hearts, everybody knows this, but it's the vendor's job to say, no, we're always the one you should go with, because that's the only way they win. But we care more that the customer's happy and ultimately that our clients are having their needs met. I think to Checkpoint's disservice, and Dameon, you can agree or disagree, sometimes you already made fun of marketing, that Checkpoint has been, as Henri said, at the forefront of a lot of this evolution in cybersecurity, but not always made that clear. Or sometimes, and I've seen this, again, we go back long enough, I've been working with Checkpoint long enough that I've seen many times where Checkpoint has a great new idea a little bit before its time. And they might see, and sometimes it's just the Israeli nature of the company, that they know something's going to be an issue and be important. So they figure out a solution to it and say, we have this is great, but we don't quite need it yet. So then a couple of years go by, the product's there, it's not feeling the love, it's not exciting anyone. And then it starts to become a problem. And then we see some new vendor come on the market with, hey, we can solve this brand new problem for you. And sometimes Gartner will even play along and introduce a magic quadrant based on that new product category, that new acronym. And all those new players say, well, that's what we do. That's one of my favorite, easiest examples is SASE. Yeah. This is a great new idea, and all those players do it. And Checkpoint's saying, we were doing that 5 years ago. You didn't care then.
Well,
so
here's a joke that I make sometimes. So, we talk, it's the whole next generation firewall thing. Well, Checkpoint was next generation in 1999 because that's when NG came out, right? So,
50 was next generation.
Well, exactly. That was next generation. I mean, it's a marketing term, but no. And then you get into application control, right? Well, application control is actually something that, I think we had for, fairly early. Now, the way that other vendors have approached it is a little bit different. And I think they, that was so that was something that was a different, that there was some catching up that had to occur as a result. But yeah,
catching up on the marketing side, because that's one that I know the inside story was an acquisition of Checkpoint by a company that had pre-existed any other vendor that had application control when it was just about instant messaging security in the very early 2000s. Does anyone else know the name of the company? I know you do, Dameon, but anyone in chat who can name the company that Checkpoint acquired to get their app wiki?
Aladdin?
Sorry?
Aladdin?
Nope. And it actually gives Checkpoint this funny tie-in to Apple. Because in the same year,
but it was actually 20 in the 2010s. Actually,
wasn't it 29 the acquisition?
Yeah, or it may have been 2000. There was 2010 or 20 somewhere in that time frame.
Somewhere in there, but Checkpoint acquired the intellectual property that became the app control engine, and Apple acquired the name of the company that was called FaceTime Communications, and they had actually developed the app wiki about 10 years before that. So it actually, by the time Checkpoint acquired it, it predated any other vendor that had that new feature, that new ability. And yet for years after, they continue to say Checkpoint's brand new to this, but the product is older than your company. And they miss that in the marketing sometimes, but I think that's a high road thing that Checkpoint often does. And sometimes, you miss out on stuff because of that, but
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the engine's still necessary for that stuff, and it's funny because I know the people that worked on the engine way back in the day that now work at other startups, or startups that are doing stuff. It's a small industry. It's kind of funny. People move around and do some really interesting stuff. It's actually
for some people that's a full-time career is just creating startups and selling them.
Exactly, or creating new ideas. And
I mean, well for themselves.
I can't tell you how many people I've met that I know I've in Checkpoint R&D over the years that have gone off and created something new and exciting, and it's actually kind of fun to watch. I mean, that's actually this is, I will tell you that this industry's way more exciting than it might seem like, because there's a lot of new ideas, and and we're trying to solve new problems, maybe new ways, or thinking about it. So, but and by the way, I think that's entirely necessary. And in fact, I think even Checkpoint says, hey, look, that we need to see these new ideas, we need to see these new things, and but we can't forget about our legacy and our past, right? I don't think you can do that, because it's I get asked sometimes if I think that we're going is there going to be any on-premise stuff anymore? No, I can tell you we're still selling on-premise firewalls. That's not changing. Now, is it growing at the same rate that it used to? Probably not, right? It's growing at a slower rate, but we're still selling them. That market is still growing because people still need to replace stuff, or maybe expand a little bit or whatever. But yeah, there's more, and there's stuff being created in the cloud and all that stuff, right? And so it's the market, clearly the mix is changing, right? Of the solutions that you have. And so you have to have stuff that operates in all these places. You can't just be, when you take something that's built on purpose-built hardware and you try and run it in the cloud, it's not going to run the same way, right? So whereas if you're running the CloudGuard network security, it's the same stuff that runs on your physical gateways. It's not any different. It's got, obviously it's running a different bare metal, but it's the same solution. You manage it the same way. You've got to do some different stuff in the cloud.
Make some modifications here and there to adapt.
Exactly. So,
but that ability to adapt is important too. To understand this is not going to always work the best. Let's at least try and get it to work here, and if we can enhance it for that environment, let's do. Yeah, so.
And we've actually done quite a bit, because I got involved with the beginning parts of that solution back in the when we were starting to put that stuff in AWS, and we had to make a lot of changes, because I'm like, oh well, this thing called layer 2 clustering. Yeah, that doesn't work in the cloud, because it barely supports layer 2. So yeah, we're not doing that. Okay, so we have to
translate elastic IPs to.
Yeah, exactly. All this just, not to go down the rabbit hole, but there's a lot of things like that. But also, is that the right solution? And this is where you get into like the workload protection stuff and the AppSec stuff and all this other stuff that we're doing, because the way we deploy applications has changed. The way we deploy, even end user workstations has changed, right? And you have to account for all of this, and the fact that we're all accessing stuff in the cloud and everything, right?
If we didn't have other people here, Dameon, I would go off on something that you reminded me of, something many, many years ago, taking what we know and what we're comfortable with to solve a new problem, instead of taking a step back and looking at the right way to solve the problem, which might be a different product, a different solution we're not familiar with and comfortable with. And sometimes that's what it is let's, I'm adapting what I know to this, but maybe that's not the right way.
And so, and I run into this in the community a lot. So, and this is something, because people will ask a question, and I will sometimes take a step back and go, why do you need that? And, I think it's important to actually know when you're going down the wrong rabbit hole, right? You got to know when to take a step back and go, all right, what do you really want to do? And and I think we all need to be open and thinking about new ways to solve problems that aren't the same way. We're, when we're a hammer, we see everything as a nail, right? And we don't want to necessarily do that. Sometimes you need a Phillips screwdriver, which the story behind that's actually really interesting if you've listened to Mike Rowe's podcast.
But sometimes, as you mentioned the rabbit hole, sometimes the quickest way to the bottom is actually to take a few steps back, go back up, and go in a better hole that's going to get you faster and easier. And sometimes we're just reluctant to do that. It's all straight ahead and narrow and
so okay, I'll mention something that's actually very specific to Avanan here, since this was a question.
Let me just interrupt you before I want you to do so, but I want to kind of start wrapping up, because we've got limited time. We need to move on to our next segment, which I think some people are waiting for anyway.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
Okay, so I will mention it in the context of we talk about email, right? So now, everybody on this call has probably dealt with email at some point in their life as somebody who's administered it. Email's been around as long as the internet. Let's face it, the SMTP protocols have been around for a while. But so when we tend to think about doing email security, we tend to put something in front of it, a mail transfer agent of some sort, right? And that has some pros and cons, right? So if your actual MTA the final destination has got some issues in it, maybe putting something in front of it's not a bad idea. In the cloud, that's a whole different problem. You don't want to do that in the cloud. And the reason why is because, think about Microsoft and Google and all these stuff. They've already built their MTA to handle a lot of stuff. they may miss a few things because they're not, they're not as security minded or whatever, but ultimately they know how to do spam. They know how to do all this stuff. They've already got reporting infrastructure and all this stuff like that. So what I'll say is a lot of solutions out there actually are just putting an MTA in front of something that's already pretty good on its own. So how can you get the best? And by the way, you also lose a bunch of visibility and all this other stuff because you're in this ecosystem where you know so much about who's getting the email that you should leverage that and figure out and be able to do stuff based on who is it, where's this email coming from, who is it talking to, and that kind of thing. And this is where this is where the really cool stuff that Abaddon's doing, that we're now part of Checkpoint is all about, right? So why get in front of their email gateway when you can tie into the service and effectively provide the same security or better, and actually instead of it being providing security instead of, so trying to replicate everything that, Microsoft or Google or one of these other companies is doing, that we let them do what they're good at. And then we add value to on top of that. And I think that's what we do. The Abaddon solution is really fantastic in that regard because we're not in line. We're working with the solution and adding security to that and catching things that they're not. We're letting them catch the stuff that they catch, and and they're going to get better, right? And so we don't want to lose any of that visibility, but we want to actually get to a point where so we're improving things even more. And so it's an additive control, not an instead of control. Yep. And I think it's that's where I think the Abaddon solution is really great. And and to also address the question that Henri had about what happens with people that have Harmony email in Office kind of situation, right? That's what I will say is that it's part of the Harmony Total bundle now. There's some different SKUs for it because their pricing was a little bit different, and so we have new SKUs for that now. For customers that are already on Harmony Email and Office 1.0, and there's a 2.0 which I'll skip because in the interest of time, but what we're doing is we're migrating the HEO 1.0 customers onto the into the Abaddon infrastructure with and adding leveraging some of that features. Right now, we're they're in the process of sort of merging those things, right? Because we were doing some stuff that they weren't doing, and vice versa. So there's we're using an OEM. We were using them in the back end. By the way, this was formerly called CloudGuard SaaS, so that's where all this comes from. So bottom line is this is something that we're actively removing the distinction between these two things. But it's it takes a little bit of time. I think it'll probably launch in Q1 for most people. If you're a new customer, you're getting it on the Abaddon infrastructure already. For the existing customers, it's we're going to migrate you over the course, and it should be a pretty seamless thing. But,
it'll still be through the Infinity Portal and everything.
Yeah, so through
that's
Infinity
part of the nice thing with that centralized.
Exactly.
Aspect.
So it's all that's all going to be there. But
the cloud is you don't have to do your own upgrades.
Yeah. So we've done for those who are interested, we've done on Checkmates, we've done a tech talk on Abaddon. You can see we got a solution there. It's actually been a really good as I said, we've had a lot of good discussions with customers around it. A lot of the customers that we acquired had no checkpoint to begin with, so it's definitely a new set of solutions. It's something that's different from what we've been doing as an organization, and so it's very nice. But I think I've got us up to the top of the hour, so we've probably actually done what we've.
I'd love to actually give people, if anyone has a question. I haven't seen many questions come in through the chat. I've been trying to look, but if anyone would love to ask a question of any of us, we'd be happy to try and answer. If nobody, I think, let's see, everyone can unmute themselves if they'd rather speak it. Donna, we'd probably stop the recording to let people do so without Big Brother.
Community